Welcome, everyone. We'll give it another minute, I think, to let people settle in. In the meanwhile, the only person I recognize is Alan Byrne from Germany, and I see him smiling now. I'm trying to look around. Who else do I recognize? Okay, so I think we should begin. Welcome, everyone. My name is Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, and I am the Director of International Relations for Roots Shorshim Judur, the Israeli-Palestinian grassroots initiative for understanding nonviolence and transformation. During this event, I'll be talking, as well as my Palestinian colleague, Noor Awad. I'll talk for about the first 25 minutes, and afterwards Noor will speak, and at the end I will also come back. At the very end, there'll be questions and answers, and then a little bit of a closing. As I begin to speak, I'd like to tell you that my words will be divided into a number of different parts, and I'll try and indicate when I'm beginning a part and ending a part and beginning the next part. The first part of our presentation, perhaps 6 or 7 minutes, I'm simply going to tell you something about Roots, the organization, as I said, that I serve as the Director of International Relations for. Roots is an association of local Israelis and local Palestinians. We're focused in the West Bank, also called Judea and Samaria, also called occupied territory or liberated territory or Palestine, disputed territory, Greater Israel. I think that all of those names, those labels, have some truth to them. Perhaps we'll talk about that a little bit later. Where we live, Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank, the two sides are totally separate. There's absolutely no contact between them. Different legal systems, different educational systems, transportation system, health systems, residences are totally separate. Where we live, economics are totally separate. The two sides do not know each other. The two sides actually are ignorant of each other, with a lot of stereotypes, often racism, fear, hostility. We're enemies. Roots believes that these two enemies have to talk to each other, that there'll never be peace and security, freedom and dignity in this land until the two sides get to know each other, deeply get to know each other. I want to explain, when I say get to know each other, I mean get to know each other as human beings, but I also mean more than that. When the two sides meet in the framework of Roots, they come with all their fears and hostilities. They begin to discover, whether in a photography workshop or a music workshop or interfaith dialogue or a summer camp or a political discussion, they discover the other side as a human being. And in many cases, that's surprising. Sometimes we're embarrassed that we're surprised, but we're still surprised. The first goal of Roots is to humanize the other side. It's difficult, but it's not the most difficult thing. There's something more difficult, and it's this. Roots says it's not enough to humanize the other side. It's not enough to find that we're both human beings, so we have something in common, a lot in common. We have to go deeper than that. We have to discover, and we have to come face to face with the particularist identity of the other side, the historical, religious, national identity of the side. We have to discover what divides us. Israelis and Palestinians tend to deny the identity of the side. Israelis say there's no such thing as Palestinians, they're just Arabs, and the Palestinians say there's no such thing as the Jewish people. It's just a religion. They don't need any land. Go back to Russia where you came from. The two sides deny each other's identity. In roots, we say that we meet each other as human beings, we humanize the other, but then we get to the level of identity, each side telling its story of who I am, the depth of how I understand myself, my connection to this land, my religion, my people, my nationality, my hopes for the future, for an Israeli, for a Palestinian state, for a flourishing Jewish state. And then we discover we know nothing about the other side, nothing about them. And it's really hard to listen because their identity contradicts my identity, and my identity contradicts their identity. But after we listen and listen more and listen until it hurts, we listen until we feel that we're traitors for listening, we begin to realize, after hearing the other side's stories again and again and again, over months and weeks and years from different people on the other side, you begin to realize, yes, they have an identity and I have no idea about them. They begin to discover and recognize my identity. I begin to discover and recognize their identity. And what we aim for in Roots is to find a way to fit two truths into one heart. There are two truths in this land, two peoples in this land. The land has two identities. From the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, historically is Palestine. And that exact same land, from the river to the sea, or let's say from the sea to the river, the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, historically is the land of Israel. The land has two identities, and it's really, really difficult to say that, to admit that. But that's the work we do in Roots, that I belong in this land as a proud Jewish Zionist, but my Palestinian neighbors also belong in this land as proud Palestinians. The land has two identities. In Roots, we do not talk about giving up on identity at all. We remain who we are, but we do give up on the on the hubris of exclusivity. Both of our identities, Israeli and Palestinian, have a large degree of hubris of exclusivity. And what we're doing is trying to overcome that you don't have to be wrong for me to be right. You can be right and I can be right. We don't have to prove the other is right, wrong for us to be right. Two truths in one land, two truths in one heart. We're both right, and we have to find a way to live here together. And it's based on recognizing the sides belonging to the land and their peoplehood. How does Roots do this? We created the only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center on the whole West Bank. It's called the Dignity Center. The only one like it. It's a shared space, and that's where the activities have been happening for the past 10 years. And we've developed a small but growing cadre of Israelis and Palestinians both, who are strong adherents of their own identities, but also have recognized and have learned empathy and trust and acceptance for the other side's identity as well. Our work is people to people. It's not about formulating political plans, but that does not mean that politics is unimportant. Politics is extremely important. This conflict demands a political solution. We in Roots believe that in order to reach a political solution, together with the political negotiations which have to take place, there also has to be the people-to-people work on the grassroots level of thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on both sides becoming willing to accept the other for who they are in the fullness of their national, historical, religious identity, such that the people-to-people work is the human foundation for a future political settlement of dignity, of equality, of freedom, security, and human rights for both sides in this little sliver of land that we both call home. That's the end of the first part of my presentation. Usually, myself and Noor talk about what I just said for an hour and a half. But under the present circumstances, we have other things to deal with. As I'm sure you all know, on October 7th, Shabbat morning, Simchat Torah, Israel was attacked, brutally attacked by over 2,500 Hamas fighters, soldiers, terrorists. They killed men, women, and children. 1,400 were brutally slaughtered. There was beheadings. There were people burned alive, little kids in their bed, infants. Another 240 were taken captive, hostage. Israel experiences itself to be under existential threat. The understanding of most of the Israeli people now and the Israeli government is that Hamas has shown its true colors. Their charter always said that peace requires no Jews and no Jewish state between the river and the sea. And now they've showed that they're willing to kill Jews, brutally slaughter in order to achieve their goals. That being the case, Israel said, it's either us or them. If we don't attack them in self-defense and eradicate Hamas, then they'll eradicate us. The Israeli government says if we don't show strength, Hamas will attack, Hezbollah from the north will attack, Iran will attack. It's either us or them. So Israel has mobilized. There's a sense in Israel of great, great fear, great, great trauma, but also great, great unity of purpose, of coming together with our backs to the wall. I just described to you what the vast majority of Israelis are experiencing. And this is while we are burying our dead. Almost everyone knows someone who's been killed, has been to funerals, people who are in captivity. We are deeply, deeply, deeply traumatized. Many Israelis are conjuring up images during the nightmares or during the day of the Holocaust. We feel exposed. I want to add to that while there are 360,000 Israeli men who are mobilized, 360,000, and the economy has stopped functioning. Everyone has someone in their family who's now in uniform. Tens of thousands are out of work. I talked about the border with Gaza, the war against Hamas. I talked about Hezbollah. I talked about Iran. I also want to point out that the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, is also part of this. Since October 7th, the Israeli army, the Israeli government, fearful that the Palestinians in the West Bank will arise, will revolt, will attack Israelis, a closure has been put on all the Palestinian towns and villages in the areas of the West Bank under Israeli control. That's called Area C. There's no Palestinian movement on the roads between their villages and towns in Area C since October 7th. Not going to universities, not going to work, very few supplies of food and water coming in. In other words, my Palestinian neighbors are now under siege. I'm not saying if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but they're deeply suffering. The Israeli soldiers who are guarding them are angry, they're rageful. I think about 80 Palestinians in the West Bank have been killed since October 7th. And I'm not saying if they were Palestinians who attacked Israeli soldiers or the Israeli soldiers attacked them. I don't know, but I know that people are dying in the West Bank also. The situation in Israel now, after everything I described, almost no one's thinking about peace. Almost no one's thinking about the other side. It's just a fight or flight mentality, them or us. Many peace groups, including Roots, are struggling to survive. To survive, I mean that our supporters, Palestinians, are asking themselves, can I really talk to the other side? Can I ever trust them? Or are they just going to stab me in the back like Hamas did to our Israeli citizens on the border of Gaza? There's a lot of doubt, even within the peace movement. And it's happening in all the peace movements, including Roots. Roots, like other organizations that have always been fighting for peace, we're now fighting for our organizational lives. Okay. That was, I think, the second part of my presentation. I want to go deeper now. What actually is happening in Roots? We can't meet Israelis and Palestinians because of the closure on the villages and towns and cities in the West Bank. We can only meet over Zoom and WhatsApp and telephone. In Roots, we've had a number of meetings, Israeli separate, Palestinian separate. We've had meetings of the two sides together. We've had joint staff meetings of the two sides together, staff meetings of just one side or the other side. What I see is some agreement among Israeli and Palestinian members of Roots and a lot of disagreement. From the very outset, Israelis and Palestinians in Roots agreed that what happened October 7th, Shabbat, Saturday, in the Israeli towns and villages near Gaza, the Gaza border, was a massacre. It was immoral, it was atrocious, it was inhuman, it should be condemned without doubt. Because we believe in nonviolence. We don't believe in killing and maiming and taking hostages. But beyond that, I discern at least two major differences between most of the Israelis in Roots and most of the Palestinians in Roots. Here we go. Two major disagreements. Most of the Palestinians, perhaps all of the Palestinians in Roots, say, yes, we condemn the massacre, but at the same time that we condemn it, we must mention that there's context to the massacre. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because, I won't say because, I'll take the word because back. I'll be more careful. It happened in the context of, say, the Palestinians, Israeli oppression of the Palestinians, that the West Bank is under Israeli military rule, occupation 1967. Gaza, so Israel withdrew from that with a disengagement, but Israel still controls Gaza. They put a blockade on Gaza. Israel controls the borders, prevents siege, entrance into Gaza, prevents an airport. You cannot say the Palestinians in Roots, you cannot understand what happened without the context. This does not justify it, does not justify it. It was wrong and evil and immoral, but it has a context. And if you don't mention the context, say the Palestinians in Roots, you are giving a free pass to Israelis to ignore the context. You're giving a free pass to Israelis to believe that if we kill Hamas, everything will be good. Everything won't be good. Say the Palestinians. Whereas the Israelis in Roots tend to say, not all of them, but most of them, that adding such a rider to a condemnation of the massacre is immoral. It's as if justifying it. Israelis say that we are like people sitting Shiva. We have our dead in front of us. We're mourning, we're going to funerals. We want to hear from our Palestinian partners a unequivocal condemnation without a rider. When you go to a Shiva house, you don't start talking about the context of the death of the person. You don't start talking about why it happened. You just say, it is terrible what happened, period. That is, I would say, the minor disagreement between the two sides in Roots. Because the second agreement is even more serious. The second disagreement is concerning the Israeli reaction to the massacre. Israel, as you know, started bombing Gaza from the air, saying that it's targeted bombing, targeting Hamas, militants and political leaders. A day or two ago, Israel began a ground invasion of Gaza, targeting Hamas, to topple Hamas, to eliminate Hamas. At this point, I think over 8,000 Palestinians, most of them civilians, innocent, men, women, and children have been killed. So the Israelis in Roots say, we're sorry. The death of innocents is a tragedy. We wish it wouldn't have to happen. But, say the Israelis, we're not condemning, we're not against the Israeli invasion. We're not calling for a ceasefire because it's self-defense. It's them or us. If we don't get Hamas, they will get us. They will do the massacre again. And Israelis also say that Hamas is not only enemy of Israel, it's enemy of all Palestinians. Hamas has been oppressing Palestinians in Gaza, keeping them in a dictatorship. denying them freedom of expression, ruining the economy, using all the money and all the resources for weapons and tunnels. Palestinians have to be freed from Hamas. So Israelis in Roots, yes, Roots is in favor of nonviolence, but this is different. This is self-defense. This is the Jewish state under existential threat, and we're really, really undone by the human tragedy of the innocents, but there's no choice. And the Palestinians in Roots respond to the Israelis and say, you're a hypocrite. If you support the Israeli invasion of Gaza, you're a hypocrite, because we have come together in partnership in Roots for the past 10 years with the banner of nonviolence. We always said our movement is understanding nonviolence and transformation. And we Palestinians, so the Palestinians Roots say, have always come out against violence, violence of Hamas, violence of Palestinian terrorists, violence of Palestinians, even though they're under occupation. We've always said violence is not the way. The way is nonviolent resistance. And now you Israelis, when you've been attacked and you say now we have to use violence to defend ourselves, you're completely contradicting everything we stand for in Roots. And I want to tell you that the Israelis in Roots feel the Palestinians just don't get it. And the Palestinians in Roots feel the Israelis just don't get it. The Israelis say, how can you ask for us to be silent when 1,400 of our citizens have been massacred and the Hamas is still raining rockets on Israel? We have to defend ourselves. What are you, pacifists? You're just going to let evil run rampant? And the Palestinians say to the Israelis, how could you dare support the killing of my brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts in Gaza? Innocents, 8,000 people, little babies buried under the rubble. How can you allow that? How can you support that? And I have to tell you, I'm coming to the end of my words. Roots is under threat. I'll tell you the truth. So many Israelis and so many Palestinians in Roots are saying, we don't know if we can trust the other side anymore. We don't know if we can hold this partnership together. I'll close by saying, before Noor speaks, and I'll be speaking again after Noor speaks, I'll close by saying that Noor and I are doing our very best to hold it together. We see each other as real partners. We still see each other as real partners. And despite the rage, and despite the tensions, and despite the anger, despite the sense we just don't get what they're thinking on the side, we are and we will do our best to hold Roots together, because Roots has to survive for the day after. Whatever happens, we're going to need people-to-people talk, people-to-people work, reconciliation, deeply understanding the other side's reality, the other side's narrative, the other side's identity. Without that, we'll never be able to live together in this land in peace. So I hand it over to Noor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Actually, I'm not going to say a lot about Roots. I think Rabbi Hanan have described the situation at Roots very well. And I feel that in this crisis that we are facing, it's really hard for me to talk in the name of Roots. Because as you heard from Rabbi Hanan, we have big disagreements in this organization, in this initiative, as in many other Israeli and Palestinian joint initiatives that are trying to work on the ground to bridge the gap between the two communities. So we are not a political movement, but for the last 7 years and for the last 9 years in general, we have worked to try to bring the Palestinians and the Israelis together to talk to each other, to create a better understanding, that and try to handle the situation non-violently, that will hopefully lead to some sort of a political transformation that respects both identities on this land. But today, I think our case is the case of people who are trying to take responsibility, while politicians and leaders and heads of states and countries have let us completely down. Whether it was a pro the Palestinian side or pro the Israeli side, we are actually seeing what I feel myself here on the ground, that there are politicians out there, representatives of different countries, many states, who are giving the legitimacy and the diplomatic protection for this war to continue. It's insane for me that there are governments like the government of the United States who is actually saying until now that they don't support the ceasefire. Whatever their explanation to it, which is I find it to be ridiculous, is allowing the killing of more people. As much as I can, I'm not trying to normalize the killing of Palestinians in Gaza in my head. It's a number that's increasing by the hour, by the minute. Today, we have witnessed another massacre. Israeli warplanes have dropped 6 tons of explosives on refugee camp, on Jabalia refugee camp, that caused the death and injury of over 400 civilians. This is what we are living with. This is what we are witnessing. This morning, I actually talked to a friend from Ramallah who half of his family and his cousins were killed last night in Gaza. This is the situation we are dealing with now. This is the situation that I'm dealing with personally. Here in the West Bank, where I live in Bethlehem, it's actually it's hard for me to say or to describe the difficulty of it, because I feel, comparing to many other places, it's the least actually difficult situation. In the West Bank, since the 7th of October, over 120 people were killed. 7 of them were killed by settler violence. In Jenin, in the city of Jenin, north of the West Bank, there are incursions every night that lead to clashes with the army and people being killed. The same thing goes for Nablus, Al-Qiliya, and other cities in north of the West Bank. The situation I'm describing feels like a war. It is a war, but it's not a war between 2 armies or between 2 countries. It's a war on the ground between 1 country, 1 army, and people on the other side. That's the situation we are dealing with. That's the situation that I deal with. And I know that at some point, we are maybe even say facing a situation where we are victims of a larger conflict, with more sides taking part of this conflict, whether this was a non-state actor like Hezbollah in Lebanon, or now we have Yemen and Iran and the groups in Iraq and Syria, and it seems like this might develop at any day into a regional war that I don't think at this point there will be a winner in this war. It just will be more suffering and more killing. So I'm not really here to give a political analysis of the situation. I'm just trying to explain to you how those events are actually affecting our lives and my life as individuals who are living in this place and as communities. Yet with the disagreement that we have at Roots and other organizations, I actually still believe that we have partners. I look at Rabbi Hanan and I have a partner on the other side. And I see also that in other organizations, Israeli human rights organizations, such as Beit Salem and other organizations, there are still partners. It's unfortunate that in this time of violence, that the voices of hate, the voices of hatred, is louder than other voices. and that the politicians with their actions have even given them more space to express the hate and incitement. It's very hard for me that I receive messages from people most of the time that's calling for destruction, for revenge, and it feels to me that these are the voices I'm surrounded with. Honestly, I have been a member of Roots for the last 7 years, and we have gone through different cycles of violence. This time is definitely more difficult and more complex than any other time. I don't know what to do on a personal level, but from the first day of the war, I have been saying that revenge is not going to get us anywhere, and retaliation is not the solution. We have to have a ceasefire. We must get aid, humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza. We must stop this madness and this killing. Hostages must be released immediately without any condition. And we must engage in a political diplomatic process that will lead into a solution. Because the point when we say on the Palestinian side that what happened on the 7th of October is part of a context, is not to justify it, but to say that if we don't really make a sustainable solution, a real solution, then we are going to face the 7th of October again and again and again. That's what I think. And I feel the huge disappointment that many governments involved in this situation are not actually saying this. They are not actually talking for de-escalation so far, but rather have been either abandoning or actually encouraging the escalation of the violence. It's a very difficult time, and I don't know what to do except trying to keep continuing to say this message to the people outside around the world. Maybe that will help us. And if you have any question after Rabbi Hanan speaks, I would be happy to try to answer your questions.
Thank you, Noor. I would like to, at this point, before we get to questions and answers, I would like to try to hold two truths in one heart, which is really hard at this point. I am relating now to both of the two disagreements between the Israelis and Palestinians' roots that I brought up earlier. I first talked about the question of condemnation of the massacre of October 7th with or without a rider. The Israelis saying rider is obscene, and the Palestinians saying without a rider is obscene. By the way, this very disagreement was played out in the United Nations just a few days ago, if you noticed. The Secretary General of the UN condemned the massacre, but he said it didn't happen in a vacuum. And the Israeli ambassador went berserk. He said that's condemning the massacre. And that's the exact argument that we have in Roots. The way I see it is that there may be truth on both sides. It may be that from an emotional perspective, the rider is out of place. But from a rational perspective, the rider is certainly in place, I think. Israelis feel, as I mentioned earlier, that we're in that state that Jewish law calls mourning. We have our dead in front of us. And at that, under that emotional tension, it feels obscene to condemn the massacre and then say, but. And I get that. I get that. But that's from the emotional perspective. That's perhaps in the first week after the massacre. But after that, now I would say, Israelis have to admit that a true condemnation of the massacre must have a rider in order to be moral. Because there really is a context. And as Noor said, I agree 100%, that if we Israelis don't have full cognizance of the context, the political context of the massacre, it'll just repeat itself. At the end of this ugly violence we're now, if we Israelis are not willing to understand our mistakes and our sins, just like the Palestinians have to realize their sins and their mistakes, if we're not really able to see where we made mistakes politically, and we have to be willing to correct them. If we're not willing to correct them, then there's just going to be, I'm sorry to say, more and more violence for years and decades. That's on the first disagreement between Israelis and Palestinians. The second disagreement about the Israeli bombing of Gaza and the military incursion on the ground, killing thousands of civilians for the purpose of toppling Hamas. I don't have a black and white position here. I really do see both sides. And I want to tell you how I, in my mind, flesh out both sides. Here we go. I hope I'm not digging my own grave by going into this. I'm just telling you what I'm thinking back and forth. And I've been attacked by many Israelis. I've been attacked as immoral for not being 100% in favor of the Israeli attack now on Gaza. It may be true, as many of my Israeli co-patriots are certain, that Hamas is a bloodthirsty terrorist organization that cannot be talked to and that we have to defend ourselves against. That may be true. I'm not sure. It may be true. And in my mind, it therefore may be true that Hamas has to be eradicated with all the human casualties, non-combatants. However, that does not mean that I'm in favor of what Israel is doing right now. Why? Because even if it was true that Hamas is incorrigible and the only way to live with them is to kill them, even if that would be true, there could be no justification for Israel's aerial and ground operation in Gaza unless Israel has a day after plan that includes a two-state solution, that includes giving the Palestinians what they need, want, and deserve for a just peace. And since I know for certain that at this point the Israeli people are not willing to make that compromise, and the government is not willing to make that compromise, therefore it's clear to me that the present Israeli attack on Gaza is pointless. It won't bring the future peace that Israel claims it's trying to accomplish, and therefore it's immoral. I can be attacked for what I just said on both sides. I know it. So it seems to me, I said what I said. I think I said it pretty clearly. So Noor and I succeeded in talking both in just 40 minutes, meaning we left a whole 40 minutes for questions and answers. I don't know how we managed to do that. So we could now move to questions and answers. And so you can use the raise your hand function. I see that Roberta Wall already raised her hand. If anyone put questions in the chat, I personally find it hard to read. Perhaps Noor can read them, but you should also raise your hand if you have. So I need a few more people raise the hand. So I'm going to call on the people one by one. If Noor, if I missed someone, or if I did something wrong, correct me. So I see Roberta. By the way, Roberta and I go back a long time. We know each other. So take it away, Roberta.
Thank you. Thank you both for holding everything you're holding. You are lights in the world right now, even though we don't know what's going to happen. So I just really wanted to start with thank you. My question is sort of a thought question inquiry. Would it kind of support Ruth's Judur Shorshim in this time if you just decided we're going to focus on humanitarian support for everyone? Like, that's going to be our focus right now, because we're not going to agree about the other stuff. And, you know, just as you know, nonviolent communication, like what are some other strategies? So I just wonder if that's something you might explore. And we all would help. That's something we could help with. We could send money. We could, you know, so that's a thought.
I'll say a few words, and I'm sure Noor will have something to say as well. What you say seems to be totally the case. Many Israelis and Palestinians and Roots feel they can't talk anymore at this point. And the more the two sides and Roots just talk to each other, they exploit each other. And therefore, we've come to the conclusion, we've come to the tentative conclusion that at least for most of the activists, perhaps Noor and I are an exception, Noor can comment upon that, it's not a time to talk to each other. So some of the WhatsApp groups we've closed, and I'm not posting too much on social media, just laying low so we can survive to the day after. And at the same time, we've embarked upon a humanitarian aid project. I'll say briefly, we're talking about an aid project that aids both Israelis and Palestinians. On the Palestinian side, we've drawn up a list of about 96 Roots participants, Palestinian participants who are in deep economic straits because of the Israelis' army closure of the Palestinian areas. And we're now raising the money to give cash aid to those 96 people, families. We're talking about $14,950 for that, for the month of November. Probably the month of December would require the same amount. In other words, $15,000 in November, another $15,000 in December. On the Israeli side, we divided the relief package into two. Part of it is aiding Israeli families that have lost their jobs because of the war, people who are freelancers, people involved in tourism, aiding them, but also aiding the evacuees from the area of the Gaza border and also from the north. The Israeli government has evacuated both borders, and we have about, I think, 250 of those evacuees staying in the geographical area around our Roots Dignity Center. So we've reached out to the social services that are dealing with them, and we developed a project in which we're giving out vouchers for the purchase of clothing for the winter. These people have no clothing. And also hiring a activities coordinator for little kids. And also contributing towards the salary of a social worker who will do trauma therapy. And altogether, we're also talking about $15,000 on the Israeli side. For November, another $15,000 for December. So altogether, we're talking about $60,000 that Roots is hoping to raise at this point, at the same time that we have to raise the money to meet our budget and to keep all our staff members paid. We've lost a lot of income because a good part of our income comes from Roots from around the world that visit our center and hear our stories. There's no tourism now. So we're trying to raise about $40,000 to cover our budgetary shortfall. Altogether, I'm talking about $100,000 in the next 2 months that we're hoping to raise. Our website is friendsofroots.net for donations, friendsofroots.net. Noor.
So actually, what you just said, Roberta, is actually the thing as Rabbi Hanan mentioned. As he explained, I think at Roots now, what we are mostly focusing on is trying to find people in need in both sides and helping them. And I've been, for the last week, actually, I found about families who are connected to Roots or not necessarily, who are actually in need now. And when I bring them some help and I tell them that this is coming from a joint organization and where there are Palestinians and Israelis, they are shocked in a way. They are shocked that there are Israelis now who are thinking of Palestinians and who want to help them. And also they are shocked that there are Jewish people in general, maybe from other parts of the world, who care for Palestinian people. So definitely that's important. I think this is what Roots should focus on now. But I will tell you a little bit why I'm disappointed or I'm struggling with the idea that maybe we can't find an agreement now, and then we have to only focus on the humanitarian work. After the massacre on Saturday, on the 7th of October, I felt that as a peace activist and as someone who spent several years in my life trying to bridge the gap and work on the ground and take responsibility, I felt that I cannot remain silent. I have to speak up. I have to say something. That was my responsibility, my moral responsibility. And therefore, I made sure to explain to my Israeli partners at Roots and to other Israelis that I know that I'm against what happened, that what Hamas did, and I condemn it. The thing is, today, after 3 weeks of this war, what I'm struggling with is that I don't almost hear voices on the Israeli side from the peace activists who are condemning and standing against Israeli violence. And it's very difficult for me to start to hear people who are finding rational, who are trying to give rational reasons or explanation or justification for this violence. Because what I feel is that I was left alone. I was disappointed that I thought that I had partners and I find out that I don't. Now, I'm not saying there are no Israeli partners. As I said a few minutes ago, I hear there are voices. One of them is Rabbi Hanan, and I keep this keeps and makes our partnership stronger. But it's still something that I'm struggling with. It's not about us that we have to agree. We have been always at Roots dealing actually with disagreements all the time. And it's about, as Rabbi Hanan always mentioned, how to hold both truth in one heart, in one space. One of the things I felt like if it happened that I was living actually in Gaza now, probably the chances that I would be killed by the bombings is very high, since that many people died. And I thought that many of my Israeli friends and the ones who I considered partners probably would justify it by saying, you know, our army was not going to kill Noor; it was going to kill Hamas, but Hamas hides after Noor, or behind Noor. So that's what I feel, and that's why I'm very disappointed with this silence.
Thank you, Noor. I just want to say that I really feel Noor's disappointment. I think I get it. Orna wanted to speak. You seem to be next in line.
Thank you. Hi, Rav Hanan, Noor. It's so nice to see you guys. It's been a long time, and I want to thank you both for your bravery. I really needed to see you both today, and it means a lot. What I'm wondering if I can have a little bit of context. I'm trying to explain to my people here in Canada, why is it that I'm wondering in the West Bank, what are people saying about Hamas? What are people's feelings towards Hamas? I understand the anger towards Israel. That doesn't need to be explained to me. But if the Palestinians are knowing that Hamas is using humans to hide weapons, and Hamas doesn't care about the lives of these innocent civilians. Why is there not more anger towards Hamas that I hear?
So in general, there is not one opinion about what's happening now. There are actually several opinions and point of views on the Palestinian side that I will try to represent as much as I can. First of all, the Palestinian side does not also believe in what the Israeli side is saying when they wage their wars on Gaza. Meaning, for example, like Israel have said in every war that we are bombing places that Hamas hides weapons or hide underneath them, like in tunnels. We have heard this many times in the war in 2021. We have heard it in 2017, in 2014, 2012. So every time we hear it, and it doesn't make sense because every time we see that Hamas is becoming stronger. Not only that, till the last day of the war, they maintained their ability to shoot rockets, and that Israel actually admitted in 2014 and many times that they could not really actually stop them. That's why they developed like military technology such as the Iron Dome in order to avoid actually entering Gaza, because they failed invading Gaza in 2014. And they could not finish Hamas with only bombing from the skies. Every Palestinian now almost believes what Israel did after the 7th of October was a campaign of revenge. It wasn't a military action in order to find a solution to Hamas. It was a revenge from the Palestinians, especially that this revenge campaign started with the cutting of water and power on over 2 million people in Gaza, with everyone. From the beginning of this campaign, the Israeli government did not differentiate between the people in Gaza if they are Hamas or just innocent civilians. So the Palestinians don't buy into the Israeli narrative and the Israeli government narrative that actually Israel care for the people in Gaza. Now, with saying that, of course, there are many Palestinians who have some disappointments with Hamas. There are people who are asking questions, like Hamas started this war on the 7th of October, but then the question is why? And I'm talking to people who, on one hand, they say, yes, we have occupation to resist, but if the resistance is even bringing more suffering, Hamas is responsible for this suffering, because like, how come that they wage this war and there is no protection for our people? So yes, Israel is killing the people in Gaza, but we also hold Hamas accountable. I have talked to many friends who have this opinion, for example, that they say they also don't think that, like, they don't exempt Hamas from any responsibility in killing Israeli civilians or in the killing of Palestinian civilians. So there are people also like this on the Palestinian side. But most Palestinians, I would say at the end, they see Israel as the aggressor. The context that we are talking about, like they see that what Hamas did is resistance. And again, like there are people who are against killing the civilians, but they say in the occupation and when violent resistance happens, of course, soldiers will be killed, but we are not okay with killing of the civilians. Now, the thing is, because of what's happening also in the West Bank, the people are not just observing from far away and have the luxury to just, say their opinion and what they think is wrong and what they think is right, because at the same time now, we hear and we experience attacks from settlers and also from the Israeli army, as I mentioned, in almost every Palestinian city. So we feel that this is an attack against all of us, and it brought back, it triggers some traumas. Like I myself, and I feel that I think now, to be honest with you, I think that if it was only us and the Israelis, and no one will intervene, this will be the second Nakba, the second catastrophe. I think that Israel will actually transfer most of the Palestinians in the West Bank to Jordan and the Palestinians in Gaza into Egypt, and they have the power to do so. But because Jordan and Egypt are not willing to cooperate in such thing, and because actually this probably might lead into a regional war where we, as I mentioned, we have other factors. I know I'm going far away with this answer, it seems, but that's also a fear that every Palestinian have. So just to go back to your question, I would say not every Palestinian agree with Hamas 100%, and not even 50%. There are people even against, and very critical of what Hamas did. But in the bigger picture, still every day we see that Israel is taking this revenge and killing the Palestinians, and we don't believe in the Israeli justifications because we have heard it so many times. So it's not true to us anymore. I just will say one thing. The last thing, for example, the bombing of the hospital, that we still are not sure, like who. And when I say we, I mean as like the international, not the Palestinian side or the Israeli side. But almost every Palestinian is certain it was the Israeli side who bombed the hospital. As maybe it could be every Israeli who is certain that actually it was a rocket from the Palestinian, from the Islamic Jihad.
Thank you, Noor.
Thank you, Noor. I see that the next hand is awake. I don't know your name from the screen, so you can unmute yourself and speak. Awake soul. I will give you a few more seconds. Awake soul. Okay, so perhaps you're not hearing me. So next online is Sharon Alexander, Dr. Sharon Alexander, who just sent me a Facebook request, friend request, and I answered positively.
I'm really grateful for this Zoom talk and the frankness and the safety to express these different viewpoints, which are not so well expressed in the general posts that I see. Most of the posts that I get are much more polarized. And it takes the willingness to speak from both sides to come to any sort of détente. And I'm really saddened to hear that in the very personal and small group that you are actually dealing with person to person, you've come to the conclusion that all you can deal with is the humanitarian needs at this point, because if you guys can't come to something together, how are these major parties in the world going to come to something together? And the corollary that I have to that is the question, how is it possible to get the voices of moderation and ability to hold both sides? How is it possible to get those voices heard and actually factored into world politics? Because we're only hearing from pretty one-sided sources in the media. And it seems like the people who are running the governments making the decisions are pretty hard line in their positions. So where is the possibility for the voices, like who are the peace partners to actually talk with? Thank you.
Noor, what do you have to say? It's a hard question.
We as Roots are members of an umbrella organization, a group that's called the Alliance for Middle East Peace. And the Alliance for Middle East Peace for the last 4 years in general was working on creating a network between many initiatives in Israel and Palestine, such as Roots and Hand by Hand School and Kids for Peace and Combatants for Peace and many other groups. And we all became members of this organization. And their strategy was and is still to create some sort of fund that will help all of these organizations do its job and to have a greater impact on the Israeli-Palestinian community. They succeeded in 2020, I think in the beginning of 2020, to secure a bill from the Congress that will support our work and also development on the Palestinian side, with that worth about $250 million US dollars. It was very hard work to get there, and they managed to succeed. They are trying to convince world leaders even in the meeting in the G7, to actually start this fund, and similar to North Ireland and Ireland fund actually that helped in the grassroots work that happened there, that helped a lot to lead to the Good Friday Agreement. So they take this as a model. Now, since the beginning of this crisis, we started on the Alliance for Middle East Peace to talk, on the Palestinian side at least, what can we do now and what should we do? And we are trying to reach out. This is not just Roots, this is the entire Alliance for Middle East Peace. We are trying to reach out to decision makers, parliament members, heads of states, to actually ask them to support a ceasefire and to support the de-escalation of this situation that we are facing now. But unfortunately, the power and the impact that we have is still little, especially when it comes to the politics in the US, comparing to the other groups who are actually funding and encouraging actually the actions of war and the escalation. And that also plays a role in my disappointment that I have, not just from partners and individuals, but as I mentioned earlier, from states and from political organizations. The United States is a very important and very effective factor, or actually player in this conflict. And that's why I keep going back to the US, and I mentioned their politics because I don't know how to describe it, but like as a Palestinian, I shouldn't have this, but I was a little bit naive that the Biden administration would be maybe better than the Trump administration or Obama. Like we will do something better, but actually with what's happening now, it's even worse. So I hope that I answered your question, but I will just add that when this crisis began, we saw how immediately many states have mobilized and actually collected resources. They talk now, I'm not sure if it's confirmed or not, about like urgent aid to military aid to Israel worth $13 billion for the war efforts. They talk about moving all these troops and moving all of these military assets. And I was shocked at the beginning, and I said, like, we have spent so many years, and many people did a hard work to bring like a little bit of money for the peace work. And when you see all of this money invested in war, there is no wonder why we can't have peace in this region, because so much money is put in actually in war effort, not in peace effort.
Sharon, I have very little to add to what Noor said, unfortunately. I'll just tell you something that I fantasize about. One word: mushrooms. What I mean is, many of my Palestinian partners have told me for years, actually, of the power of trauma therapy of joint Israeli-Palestinians group using, how do you say, psychedelic mushrooms. Perhaps we need, and actually I'll tell you, this is perhaps not right. I dreamt that Israel put into the water of both Israel and Gaza LSD. It might help.
I volunteer to come over and help be a therapist.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go back to the person that wanted to speak earlier, Awake Soul. Tell us your name.
Hi, it's Rivka Leah. I just don't know how to use the tech functions on this phone. Sorry. Took me a while. So I just wanted to say I'm calling in from America, but as often as not, I live in Israel, and I understand that as a privilege. And I think I'm a bit unusual in that I've gone very deep into both far left and far right politics. And I've done a lot of peace work, and I'm also extremely opinionated and outspoken. And So the first thing I wanted to do was to introduce you guys to a community and a tool that might help this organization and all the individuals who are here today who are interested. I've been working with this community almost 20 years. Arnold Mendel's process work / world work community. There is a base in Portland. There are people in Israel and Palestine. There are people in Europe. There are people in Asia. There's people all over the world who do this work, and they've been doing it a really long time. And it's a beautiful method for intrapersonal, interpersonal, and international conflict resolution, where you really break down I don't want to take all my time in describing their work, but I found it to be incredibly useful. Unfortunately, we usually gather once every 2 years or so in a different country and sort of hash out all the world's isms and wars, and it's trauma processing. It's, a lot of the people, myself included, or therapists or healers who do, somatic work, spiritual work, psychological work, also trained mediators and conflict facilitators. And it's a place where you can deal with the really heavy issues, not just skirt around them, because there's a pretty safe, neutral body of a lot of people holding space. So maybe I can talk to you guys about that. There is a group going right now out of Russia, of all places. And it's on Thursday nights, Russian time, which I believe is around noon Eastern Standard Time in America, which would be, I guess, pretty much the same as Israel-Palestine time. So, so that group is open, it's free, and if people want to continue processing, and there are other people who are holding space for this. So that's a tool I wanted to introduce. I wanted to share a personal experience I've had with the money piece. I think it's very important, even as a peace worker, even with peace organizations, to vet very carefully where money is going, because I personally have paid money to peace organizations. I have volunteered at teaching art at a peace camp in the West Bank. And, in a Palestinian village, I stayed with a Palestinian host. He was lovely. And I found out all my money for room and board went to support Hamas, And I think it's very important. Westerners are very naive about this, and they're just like, "Oh, everyone's singing Kumbaya." It's like, no, you're actually giving money a lot of time to organizations, even if not directly, indirectly, to people who are using it to actually slaughter you. So I think as Westerners, you need to be a lot more suspicious about who you're giving money to. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to blow your fundraising campaign. That's not my intention at all here. But as an organizational feedback, I think one of the gifts that Shorshim roots, I don't know how you call it in Arabic. What is the name in Arabic?
Judur.
Sorry, what?
Judur.
Judur.
Yes.
So thank you. I think this organization, one of its uniquenesses and gifts is the fact that it's focusing on dialogue, where people are, actually getting to hear each other, to speak, to find out, what's going on, from the heart. And in my experience, what really heals this, like you were saying earlier, of Hanan, like the people getting together and just really speaking and getting to know each other, the interfaith encounter, the multicultural encounter, the dialogue, the trauma healing, the meditation. I think almost everything else, I understand people need to eat and have clothes. My personal belief is that's not where the money should be going. I think the money should be going to education and actual interfaith encounter. Because
cut you short. Just take 20 more seconds. There's other people who want to speak.
Right.
Sorry.
So that was the second piece. And then my third piece is, I just want to say, Noor, first of all, power to you for showing up in a room full of Jews. Basically, I'm disappointed. I thought this was going to be a mixed dialogue, and that's why I was excited to be here. And I'm kind of really bummed out to see that, as far as I can tell, you're the only Palestinian who's speaking. And I just want to say, that I know that takes a lot of strength to be the only one of your people in a room. And also I'm like, where's everybody else? Because if there's no dialogue, it's just a monologue.
Okay, Noor, do you want to respond to any of that? Any of the we just heard? Thank you.
Yeah, I will say that I agree with you. We need more Palestinians in the room. We need to have, we must have dialogue all the time between Israelis and Palestinians and also Jews in general, because I feel that this is now is more important than ever. I will tell you that the Palestinian community have been also witnessing the anti-Semitic attacks in the U.S. And also some of the Islamophobic and racist attacks against the Palestinian community or Muslims or Arabs. And I have heard from many of my neighbors and friends and people who are actually, even though we are living this situation, but they are so worried about people outside like this. And as I said before, when they see there are Jews from the US who are in solidarity with the Palestinians, who are not justifying the Israeli government crimes or trying to give any justification or protection to it, that really keeps a lot of hope, and it's very important. I just want to go back to one of the comments in the chat. I think it was by Jeff Shapiro, if I'm correct, about that if Catholics and Protestants could live together, that means for sure that Muslims and Jews could live together. And I agree 100%. At Roots, actually, we focus a lot on the role of religion being a part of the solution, not just being part of the problem, because we do recognize that religion in Israel and Palestine have been part of the problem so far. And this is very important because Hamas is actually representing itself as a religious political movement in the Palestinian society that speaks in the name of religious people and in the name of Islam. I just want to emphasize that unlike what Israeli leaders and politicians, who are also, for me, are terrible as much as Hamas, for many of you, are actually misleading the public when they call this a war of religion, or this is like a war between barbarism and civilization, or it's the war between the children of light and the children of darkness. That all of this propaganda is to avoid what Rabbi Hanan have courageously admitted and actually represented to you, which is that there is a context for what's happening. There is two nations here. This is what we are talking about at Roots. There are two people who their identity is deeply rooted to this land, the Jewish people and the Palestinian people. And until we figure out a way that we can accept and recognize each side identity and find a way to live in dignity, respect, and recognition on this land, unfortunately, we're going to keep denying the other side and continuing to kill each other. So this is not a conflict about religion. Many religious leaders across the land, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and Druze, and also from other religious minorities, have expressed from the first day of the war that nothing in our faith and our religion justify what Hamas is doing or what the Israeli government is doing. They didn't try to justify. So for sure, there are religious voices and there are religious people who are using religion as well, or actually talking from the religious point of view, how religion can bring us together and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But I would say this is not a religious conflict. There is a strong religious dimension. Hamas use religion. Israeli politicians as well use religion in many ways, in many examples, and religion should not be used to justify killing innocent people.
Okay, thank you, Noor. We're going to go to the next person with the hand up, which is Rinat Yah. So please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, my heart is broken for the last 3 weeks and longer, and for everyone there. I am German and Israeli, so I lived in Israel for 20 years until after the Second Lebanon War. I decided for my old age it's time to leave, because I realistically thought there is not a way to peace which I will see in my lifetime. So I hope your children and children's children will see it, but it's not something which is a prospect for for us or for the next generation, and whoever thinks as a peace worker to believes that peace is something to be done now. I think it's a long-term process up from the ground. And so all the groups and how you say grassroots groups, they do the work and they do a good job, and they're always interrupted by this war stuff going on. Yeah, I think both sides have a messed up leadership. I mean, look at what kind of Israel, what kind of leaders they have. Yeah, so they messed up the whole situation. They didn't protect the people in the south, and now Netanyahu is
I think I'm going to have to interrupt you.
Shall I make it closer? Okay, and Hananya and whatever, they are just not good, and then we need new leaders, young leaders, better leaders, and so I hope you will be able to create them. And my third point is, I think the women should have a greater impact on negotiations and on influence, because I mean the women wage peace and women of the sun, they find a way of understanding each other, even so the situation is difficult. So yeah, why can you guys can't?
We indeed need more women involved. Thank you. Noor, do you want to say anything, or should we go to the next?
It's a very good question. I will just say, I have read the Women Wage Peace and the Women of the Sun statement, and I find it to be very brave. Almost every statement that came out from partner organizations in the Alliance for Middle East Peace actually brought me some hope. Not only because these statements are also talking to the people outside, but also it clarifies the position on where those activists, where those people are standing now in the midst of this crisis. So I have read their statement. I have read also other statements as well. I hope that we at Roots will be able to have not just a statement, but we will learn from what's happening, and that we can handle it better, because it is a great challenge. I'm not saying it's easy for all of us, for the Palestinians and Israelis at Roots, but we must be even a better activists, in my opinion, to meet this challenge.
Thank you, Noor. I'm going to call on Jeff Greer, and I'm only going to give you 1 minute to say your question. Yeah.
I can do that. I understand. My question is, you guys are so remarkable light in this very dark situation. What are you doing to take care of yourself and your safety?
Noor, you want to relate to that?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for caring. I have a guilt feeling that I am not in a place of suffering as many of my people are, and I'm aware about this guilt feeling, but I'm dealing with it every day. In Bethlehem, if I'm not leaving the city, and I cannot leave the city because it's closed, I'm mostly in area A, so I'm mostly in a safe area. I've went to some protests, but thank God I wasn't injured. Nothing bad happened to me. I'm trying to also give myself like a break, but I have also to keep watching the news and what's happening, to keep aware about the developments and the updates. And what actually helping me is that I also feel that I'm also taking care of not only myself, but I'm taking care of my family, my parents, many people around me who I feel like they are in need, for me to be there and support them in this time. and that makes me also that's part of also taking care of myself.
Jeff, I will just say two things. One is that I'm a strange person, and for me, work is therapy. So I'm just always working on the work of Roots, spreading the word and talking to my colleagues, trying to keep things together and raising money. And the second, and it's good for me, it seems. And the second thing I'll say is that you asked about keeping ourselves out of danger, and Noor and I agreed to meet in person tomorrow. And we think we found a way that we can do it. And I've been saying to myself, it's probably a little bit dangerous what we're planning to do tomorrow, but we're going to do it anyway, I think. So to be a peacemaker, sometimes you have to take certain risks.
Well, God be with you.
Amen. Let's go to Alexander.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief. If at this present moment it's really hard for Israelis and Palestinians to talk to each other, even people who have been participating in programs like yours for years, how about you who are able to get like a broader view of what's happening, talking to your respective groups? I know there's a huge risk of being called lunatics, traitors, whatever. But do you see any possibilities to talk to neighbors, friends, and family, or even in some more structured way through media, etc., about what you've been telling us here in this webinar? Thank you. And I'd like to hear from both of you, if possible.
Yeah. As we mentioned, even peace activists find it difficult to listen to each other. And most of the leaders of Roots at this point think that speaking up publicly is just going to ruin our credibility. In other words, speaking to our own constituencies on each side, it's better just to lay low and to wait until the day after when a little bit of the rage and the trauma and the pain in the morning has subsided. And that Roberta, who spoke first, also seemed to ratify that approach. I've also heard that approach from Father Gary Mason, who's a Roman Catholic priest who is one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement. And he, during these times in Israel, for many years, he's been accompanying Israel and Palestinian peacemakers. He also seems to take that approach, which of course is very disappointing that there's nothing we can do now. But it looks like there's nothing we can do now. There's nothing we can do now to really bring the two sides together, to create empathy for the other side. The one thing it looks like we can do, at least on the Israeli side, perhaps we can do something to prevent some of the subtler violence that's taking place now against Palestinians right in the area where we live. I don't know what we can do, but I've heard some of my colleagues and saying that, yes, this is something that we can perhaps wrap our heads around and work on. Noor?
So it's very difficult to try to talk to people around me about empathy to the other side, or to try to understand what the other side is doing now, because the other side for most Palestinians are not the Israeli people, it's the Israeli government. It's the army, it's the bombardment in Gaza. It's unfortunate that this is the reality, and that's how most of my community are viewing the other side. They don't see them as people, but rather as the government and the army and this war machine that's killing our people. Everyone I talk to is almost afraid of what's going to happen next. And today I met with a friend here in Bethlehem who's a pharmacist, and he was never involved in any of the work we do, but he knows about the work I do. And he asked me, what do they say in your organization? And I felt like from his question, he was just looking for some hope. He wanted me to tell him something that actually positive from the Israeli side that can give him the hope. And I've shared with him some of the things that are hopeful that I heard, and some also of the challenges. And I think he just like like he's processing what I say to him. But it feels like now to talk to the people around us is like talking sometimes to the it's like facing a wall. It's very difficult to try to convince people or change their minds or affect their opinions when they are so drowned in the fear of what's happening and what might happen after.
Thank you, Noor. Let's hear from Anna. You're still muted, Anna.
It works.
Yeah, we got it. We hear you.
Thank you for the discussion, I said, because I think it's very brave. I have a few things. I think one of the problems I have is the talking about the Palestinians and the Israelis, or the Palestinians and the Arabs, because I think that's so rhetorically, it's not really it's not real life. I've been living in the Galil for many, many years. And I know, and that's why I still hope in a big miracle, even if it sounds naive and perhaps silly to most of the people. But I think that even in these situations, there are still so many people just living together. And even on this very, I don't know, one-sided news in Holland, there was suddenly, you know, they're very against the Israelis and very against the war machine and all this kind. There was suddenly a brief intermediary in a very short morning news in the morning of about a Jewish woman, an Arab neighbor from Kibbutz Metzar. That's near Bakr al-Gharbiya. How they're living together as neighbors already 70 years. And I know that many people I know in Galil, they're living, going inside the villages, outside the villages, going into the kibbutzim and going outside the kibbutzim. And they live their life and nobody wants anything to have to do with these wars and this bombing. I myself, I thought when they come with the revenge, then every bomb the Israeli leadership or the army is throwing, they're digging their own grave because it's not going to be any solution for nothing. But yeah. My heart is crying in all this polarization and media circus. When I hear on the news that the Palestinians, it's crying for everybody who is killed without any blame. But when there is being said that there is no bomb shelters for the Palestinian people, how poor they are, and then I think at the same time you see this displays of the underground towns from Hamas, I cannot believe what I'm hearing and seeing then. What do you think about that?
I will tell you what I think, and I think what most Palestinians think about it today. If there was to be bomb shelters for people in Gaza, I think, and many Palestinians think, that the Israeli army will still bomb them. They will still target Palestinians. Because as I said, almost no Palestinian believes that Israel right now is trying to target Hamas, but rather this is a revenge attack against all the citizens of Gaza. And we had no war before that we had such amount of people killed. In 2014, it's not the game, it's just numbers, but like 2,000 people were killed. The number of casualties of this war so far is 4 times the 2014. Mm-hmm. That's why on the Palestinian side also we see that now there is a start of a shift around the world about the support for Israeli action. Even the US government said that, but not very. They said it in a way that we advised the Israeli government to defend itself, but in consideration of with the international law. Journalists yesterday have asked questions to the Israeli defense minister about why there's so a huge number of casualties. And as I said before, the old Israeli excuse all the time is that Hamas is hiding under the ground, and that's what we are targeting Hamas. But that's not a justification for killing so many innocent people. So So that's what I personally believe, and I think in this opinion, I'm representing so many of the Palestinian or the Palestinian side.
I can understand your feeling, but
Anna, our time is up, unfortunately.
yes, I find it very hard to believe. Let me put it this way: I just
What I'd like to do now,
Yeah.
it's now half past the hour we said we'd end, although there are two more people that wanted to ask questions. So let's do like this. I will make a 30 or 40-second closing. Perhaps Noor also wants to say something. And then if any of you want to stay after, we can answer the two questions of Leah and of Lena. So I would just like to tell you at the end, Roots has a website. We'd love you to go to our website, donate if you're able, learn about our work, friendsofroots.net. It's already in the chat, friendsofroots.net, friendsofroots.net. We also want you to know that Noor and I are going on a US speaking tour, February 18th to March 7th, February 18th to March 7th. We have about, at this point, 15 synagogues, churches, mosques, and universities that invite us to speak, almost all on the East Coast. Also, I think in Chicago and, yeah. If you are part of a synagogue or university or church or mosque who would like to invite us to speak, please contact us through the website and we will try and fit you in. I'll just add that we may begin the speaking tour a few days earlier before March 18th, and we may end it a few days later after March 7th because we have a lot of requests. We may have to expand the tour to fit everyone in. I will say at the very end that it's clear to us that if we don't talk and listen to each other, we'll never be able to live in peace. We need a political solution, but part of the bringing us to a political solution is the people on the ground talking to each other. And in the end, I as an Israeli have to know that there won't be peace unless the Palestinians also get what they need, want, and deserve. And the Palestinians have to know there won't be peace unless Israel gets what it needs, wants, and deserves, which means that for us in Roots, the path forward is pro-Palestine, at the same time pro-Israel. That's really the only way to be pro a better future for both sides. Noor, would you like to say a few words?
So thank you everyone for being here and for actually for your questions. And as I can feel and I can see the desire to actually engage in a constructive dialogue. I think that there are many people here who have genuine desire to actually talk with me as a Palestinian and as Noor, and hear from me. I feel like you are open to listen. I hope that there will be more people like this. I really appreciate it. And I just want to add that also, you know, that governments do lie. News media do actually sometimes tell part of the truth. They tell certain narratives and not all of the facts. And I'm not saying that this is not an invitation to start to go into some sort of conspiracy theories. But if you want to really follow what's happening here, then talk to the people on the ground. Because I think that part of what me and Rabbi Hanan are doing, we are trying to give voice to the voiceless people here, to try to give the voice to the people. Not what the politicians are saying, not to the speaker person of the IDF or the speaker person of Hamas, but to what the people are experiencing and what they are feeling, because this is what need to be heard. And if you are trying to follow the news, then try to follow the news and hear the news from different news agencies or media, not just from one side. As I try also to do this myself when I follow the news. I really thank you. Thank you for being here and for listening to us.
Thank you, Noor. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to Aleph for arranging this event. So everyone, of course, is free to go, but I will stay on for Leah and for Lena if you want to ask. So Leah, while everyone else is leaving, you can unmute yourself, and then afterwards, Lena, if she wants.
Hi, Rabbi. Thank you so much. I want to thank the both of you for your radical honesty, because it is such a refreshing thing to be hearing in the day and age that we're in right now. And I want to reply with my own radical honesty. I think it would be subpar to do anything else. I'm first generation of people from Israel. My family's from Israel, and I've been fed a narrative my whole life. And I've always, as a Westerner, been expressed to different viewpoints. And it really took this particular conflict to kind of wake me up even more to the fact that how horrible it is. And it ignited something in me I've never felt before. And so I wanted to first thank you, Noor, for even just expressing that you acknowledge that this was terrible, because to hear you say that was extremely powerful. And Rabbi, then to hear you say that you are witness to the occupation in the West Bank and all the horrors that brings, just to hear that is so refreshing. And I see that there are these groups, the UNRWA, it's had misappropriation of funds. It just uses money to teach hate, and the UN has failed all states involved in this. It's failed the Palestinian state, it's failed the Israeli state, in my opinion. How do we, how do we lift up your voices? How do we showcase that there is this tie between the communities, even within this strife that you guys are expressing, that you still have this tie, besides monetarily, because a lot of people, are don't have the means. What can we do? I know you said you're coming on a speaking tour, but what in the meantime, February seems like a million years away. What can we do on the ground here? I'm in New York City. It's insane. It's so polarizing. I'm sure you're seeing the violence happening around the world. What can we do?
You can spread the word about our work, and the word about other organizations doing similar work. Spread the word of OLMEP, as we had heard from Noor. And you can talk to your neighbors. And I don't just mean talk to them about roots. You can try and reach out to Muslims and Christians, to Arabs, Palestinians, and try to find a way to build bridges on the grassroots level. At the very beginning, it's impossible usually to talk about the conflict. So you begin talking what you have in common. And the hope is to develop enough of a common language, enough trust and rapport to eventually be able to hear each other's stories and narratives about this conflict. That's a little I can say. Perhaps Noor can add more.
I agree with what Rabbi Hanan said. I will just add, if you are able to take action, please do. I think that, as I said several times on this meeting, I think that it's very problematic the way how the U.S. government is behaving toward the situation. I think they say on their perspective they are being supportive of Israel. I think they are actually by being supportive of Israel in such a blind way, they have failed people who are trying to find solutions on both sides. That's what I feel. And these policies and this behavior by the government must change. So if you are able to take action, as Rabbi Hanan said, in a way, we see all of the pro-Israel rallies and the pro-Palestine rallies. And I understand how I also personally feel about when I see people out there standing for Palestine, or Israelis feel about people who are standing up for Israel. But what we actually need is that people who are pro-peace, people who are going out to say, we must have a solution for this, a real solution for this. And to continue to kill and not to have a ceasefire is not a solution.
I just remembered one other thing, which is that Roots has an American Friends of Roots organization. There's a board of Jews, Christians, and Muslims that meets by Zoom once a month in the US to support our work on the ground. If we have people who are businessmen or businesswomen, people who have connections in the Jewish or Christian or Muslim community, people have experience in nonprofit management, so contact us through the website and we can explore the possibility of joining the board. So lastly, we have Lena who wanted to speak, and then we will close this out.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you for making the time to do this and to show up and tell your truth. I just want to say that, my daughter lives in Jerusalem and her beloved is Palestinian and lives in East Jerusalem, and they are members of a small but very powerful group of young Israeli and Palestinian lefties who are doing the work of being in relationship and creating cognitive dissonance for the extremists on both sides, not even extremists, the moderates even on both sides, when they are riding around their cars together in Jerusalem and they get pulled over by, Israelis and saying, how can you be riding with the, to the young Jewish people, are you okay? Like, yeah, I'm with my friend. How can you be friends with him? Don't you know what they just did? Like, well, my friend is not Hamas. My friend is just my friend, and it's creating this cognitive dissonance for people that there are real friendships amongst our peoples, and that it makes it much harder to kill each other, So I also want to say that I appreciate you bringing up the Women Wage Peace, their statement. I thought was beautiful, and they are finding a way to do this work together. Standing Together is finding a way, the Israelis and Palestinians to work together. Olive Tree, Achlat Amim, so many organizations that are made up of young, especially young Israelis and Palestinians, are finding a way through this incredible, painful, horrible, so many young leftist activists were killed on October 7th, and yet still they're doing this work and saying not in our names. So I hope that you can connect with them. I hope that you are connected to them. I think that is a way to maybe that roots can hold together and do this work together. And I want to say for everybody here who wants to do something, call your Congress, your elected representatives every single day. There's such an easy app to do that. Jewish Voice for Peace has this wonderful script and a platform where you can get in touch with your elected officials every day and say, stop funding genocide with our tax dollars. Like, I'm Jewish, I'm your constituent. I don't agree that is how to stand with Israel. The only way to stand with Israel, the only way to make peace in Israel is to treat Palestinians as human beings. If you want to get rid of Hamas, then take care of our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Killing isn't going to do it. Dibarti, thank you.
Thank you, Lena.
Thank you, Lena.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye, Noor.
Bye, Hanan. Have a good night.
Thank you all so
Thanks again. Bye, everyone.